The September sun was setting over Lake Minnetonka, painting the water in shades of gold and amber that I'd loved since childhood. I stood on the wraparound deck of the lake house, watching the light dance across the waves, knowing this might be the last peaceful moment before everything changed. "Sarah, get in here." My father's voice cut through the evening air like a knife. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The main living room was filled with family. My parents, my older brother Marcus and his wife Jennifer, my younger sister Emily, and my uncle Robert, who'd driven up from Minneapolis. They were all seated around the massive stone fireplace, faces serious, like some kind of tribunal. "Sit down," Dad said, gesturing to the single chair they'd positioned facing everyone else. I was 32 years old, and they'd arranged the furniture like I was a teenager being called in for discipline. I sat. "Your mother and I have been talking," Dad began, his voice taking on that formal tone he used for business discussions. Richard Morrison had built Morrison Commercial Properties from nothing, and he'd never let anyone forget it. "We've been more than generous with you over the years, letting you stay here whenever you wanted, never charging you rent for your apartment in the city." "The apartment I found and leased myself," I asked quietly. "The apartment we co-signed for," Mom interjected, her voice sharp. Patricia Morrison had always been Dad's perfect complement, where he was blunt force, she was precision strikes. "Because your credit wasn't good enough on your own." That had been 8 years ago, right after college. I'd paid every cent of rent since then, but they'd never removed themselves as guarantors. I'd asked twice. They'd insisted on keeping things as they were. "The point is," Marcus cut in, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, "we've all been carrying you for too long. I'm VP of Operations at Morrison Properties. Emily just made junior partner at her law firm. What have you accomplished?" "I worked as a property manager for a small residential company, or at least that's what they thought." My business cards said property manager, and I'd never corrected their assumptions. "I have a job," I said simply. "A job?" Dad's laugh was bitter. "You manage apartment buildings, Sarah. You collect rent and call plumbers. That's not a career. That's not what I raised you for. We had such high hopes for you," Mom added, and the disappointment in her voice was a familiar weight. "You were so bright in school. We thought you'd join the family business, maybe take over eventually. Instead, you're fixing toilets." "I don't actually fix the toilets myself," I said. "Don't be smart," Emily snapped. At 28, she'd always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect career trajectory, perfect marriage to a corporate attorney. "This is serious. We're trying to help you." "Help me how?" Uncle Robert cleared his throat. He was Dad's older brother, semi-retired but still holding significant shares in Morrison Properties. "Sarah, we've decided to sell the lake house." The words hit like a physical blow, though I kept my face neutral. This house had been in our family for 40 years. My grandfather had bought it as a fishing cabin, and gradually expanded it into the sprawling property it was now: 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a boathouse, and 3 acres of prime lakefront property. "We're listing it next month," Dad continued. "The market's strong right now. We should get close to $4 million for it." $4 million. They had no idea what this property was actually worth. Waterfront estates on Lake Minnetonka were selling for $6 to $8 million, especially with this much land. "And we've decided," Mom said, exchanging glances with Dad, "that you won't be part of the proceeds." The room went silent except for the old grandfather clock ticking in the corner. "Marcus and Emily have built real lives," Dad explained. "They have actual careers, families to support. The money from this sale will be divided between them and Robert. You'll need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet." "I see," I said quietly. "We're not trying to be cruel," Jennifer added, though her smile suggested otherwise. "We're trying to motivate you. Sometimes people need a push to reach their potential. And part of that means you need to clear out your things," Marcus said, standing up and walking to the window. "This weekend is the last time you'll have access to the house. We're changing the locks on Monday, and getting it ready for staging." I looked at my mother, who was examining her manicured nails. "You're packing my childhood things." "I've already started," she said. "I put everything from your old room in boxes in the garage. You can take them when you leave Sunday." "What about this weekend?" I asked. It's only Friday evening. Oh, you're not staying the weekend, Emily said, almost cheerfully. That's actually the other thing we needed to tell you. We're having a family celebration here, just the real family. Marcus and Jennifer, Mom and Dad, Robert and me and David. We're celebrating the sale, and our successes. You'd just be uncomfortable. So I need to leave tonight. Within the hour would be best, Dad said, checking his Rolex. We have caterers coming at 7, and it would be awkward to explain why you're here. I sat there for a moment, looking at each of them. These people who I'd loved my entire life, who I'd watched struggle in 2008, when the real estate market crashed, and Morrison Properties nearly went bankrupt, who I'd helped in ways they didn't even know about. Before I go, I said slowly, reaching into my bag, there's something you should see. Sarah, we don't have time for dramatics. Mom sighed. I pulled out a folder, and placed it on the coffee table. The leather portfolio was embossed with gold lettering. Summit Point Properties, LLC. What's this? Marcus asked, but he was already reaching for it. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lake while he opened it. I heard the rustle of papers, then silence. This is a property deed, Marcus said, his voice strange. Yes, I replied, not turning around. For this house, yes. It says its owner is Summit Point Properties, LLC. That's correct. More rustling. This deed is dated 3 years ago. It says Morrison Family Trust sold the property to Summit Point Properties he paused, for $2.8 million. Now I turned around. Dad had gone pale. Mom was staring at the papers Marcus held. That's impossible, Dad said. We still own this house. No, I said quietly. You don't. You haven't for 3 years. Uncle Robert grabbed the papers from Marcus. His hands were shaking slightly as he read. This has my signature, and Richard's, and Patricia's. This is real. Of course it's real, I said. You sold it to me when you were desperate for capital, after the Henderson deal fell through. The Henderson deal. I watched the memory dawn on their faces. 3 years ago, Morrison Properties had tried to acquire a major commercial complex in downtown Minneapolis. They'd over-leveraged themselves, and when the deal collapsed, they'd been facing serious cash flow problems. The private buyer, Mom whispered. The one who paid cash for the lake house to bail us out. That was you. Dad's voice was barely audible. That was my company, yes, but you're a property manager, Emily said, like she was trying to make the facts fit her understanding of the world. You manage apartments. I own a property management company, I corrected. Summit Point Properties. We specialize in residential and commercial holdings across the Twin Cities metro area. I pulled out my phone and brought up our website, turning it so they could see professional photography of high-rise apartments, retail spaces, office buildings, our portfolio, our success stories. How? Marcus demanded. Grandfather left me money, I said simply. When he died 10 years ago, he left equal amounts to all 3 of us grandchildren, with one difference. Mine was in a trust that I couldn't access until I turned 25, and it could only be used for real estate investment. That's not possible, Dad said. We would have known. It was a private trust, managed by his attorney. You weren't notified, because grandfather specified it that way. He told me about it the week before he died. Said he saw something in me that reminded him of his younger self. I pulled out another document and placed it on the table. This is the trust documentation. $2 million. Invested wisely over 7 years. I started small, a duplex in St. Paul, then a 4-unit building, then a small apartment complex. The apartments you manage. Mom said slowly, understanding dawning. The apartments I own. I still do manage them. I believe in hands-on ownership, but Summit Point Properties now owns 43 residential properties and 12 commercial spaces across Minnesota. The silence in the room was deafening. When you needed cash 3 years ago, I continued. I knew the lake house was coming up for discussion. I heard Uncle Robert suggesting you sell it. So I made an offer through my attorney. Cash, quick close, no inspection contingency. You needed $2.8 million immediately. I provided it, but we thought. Dad's voice trailed off. You thought some faceless investment company bought it. You never asked who was behind Summit Point Properties. You got your money, saved Morrison Properties from bankruptcy, and never looked back. Jennifer's face had gone from smug to ashen. So you've owned this house for 3 years? Yes, and you let us keep using it. I saw no reason to change the family dynamics. I charged no rent, asked for nothing. I simply wanted to preserve grandfather's house. Marcus was reading through more papers in the folder. These are rental agreements. For all of us. Yes, informal ones. I never enforced them because you're family. But you could have, Emily said quietly. At any time. Uncle Robert was still examining the deed. As the family's unofficial financial advisor, he knew property documents better than anyone. This is all legitimate. The sale was legal. The trust was real. He looked at me with something like respect. You've been sitting on this for 3 years. I had no reason to bring it up. Until now. Dad finally found his voice. You let us think you were a failure. I never said I was a failure. You assumed it. I manage properties. That was true. I just didn't specify that I own them. This is ridiculous, Marcus said. But his bravado was cracking. So you own the lake house. Fine. We'll buy it back from you. The family money from selling it will still be divided among us. Except you can't sell what you don't own, I said. And I'm not interested in selling. Mom stood up, her hands trembling. Sarah, you can't be serious. We're your family. You're the family that just told me I wasn't welcome here anymore. The family that was planning to exclude me from inheritance proceeds. The family that's been mocking my career choices for years. We were trying to motivate you, Dad shouted. By humiliating me, by literally packing my things, and telling me to leave. We didn't know, Emily said softly. Exactly. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You just assumed. I picked up my bag. I'm going to stay at the property tonight. As I originally planned. You're welcome to leave. This is our family house, Jennifer protested. No, I said firmly. This is my house, which I've generously allowed you to use for 3 years without charge. That generosity ends now. My phone rang. I looked at the screen and answered it. Hi David. Yes, I'm at the lake house now. The situation I mentioned has come up. Could you come by tomorrow morning? With the updated property agreements. 9 a.m. would be perfect. Thank you. I hung up and looked at their confused faces. That was my attorney, David Berkshire. I believe you know him, Emily. He's a senior partner at your firm. Emily's face went white. David Berkshire is your attorney, has been for 5 years. He handled the lake house purchase. He's been very helpful with Summit Point's legal needs. He's one of the most expensive real estate attorneys in the state. Emily whispered. He's worth every penny. I checked my watch. Now I believe you have caterers coming at 7. Since this is my property, I'll need to approve any outside vendors. Did you get my permission to hire caterers for my house? Silence. I thought not. I'll need you to cancel them. In fact, I'll need all of you to leave by tomorrow afternoon. I'm having the locks changed at 3 p.m. You can't kick us out, Marcus said. But there was no conviction in his voice. I pulled out another document from my bag. This is a formal notice to vacate. Because you've been staying here under informal arrangement, rather than a legal lease, I'm only required to give you 30 days notice in Minnesota. However, because there's been a material breach of our informal agreement, specifically your attempt to exclude me and sell property you don't own, I'm reducing that to 24 hours. This is insane, Dad said. Sarah, be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You're the ones who spent the last hour telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't welcome, wasn't family. You made your position clear. I'm simply clarifying mine. Uncle Robert set down the papers. Sarah, I think everyone spoke in haste. Obviously there's been a misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding. You all understood perfectly what you were doing. You were cutting me out because you thought I was weak, unsuccessful, someone to be dismissed. We made a mistake, Mom said, and I could hear real distress in her voice now. Yes, you did. Can we talk about this? Dad asked. Really talk? Not like this. I considered it. These were still my parents, my siblings, my family, but they'd shown me exactly who they were, when they thought I had no power. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady. You're going to leave this property tomorrow by 3 p.m. After that, if you want to visit, you'll need to request permission in advance. I'll consider each request individually. And the money from the sale 3 years ago? Marcus asked quietly. That money saved Morrison Properties. If I'd known you planned to cut me out of family proceeds, I might have structured things differently. But what's done is done. What about Morrison Properties itself? Uncle Robert asked, and there was something knowing in his voice. I smiled slightly. What about it? He started laughing, a sound with no humor in it. You didn't just buy the lake house 3 years ago, did you? I don't know what you mean. The silent investor who bought in during our crisis, the one who took a 15% stake in Morrison Properties for $5 million in emergency capital. Dad's head snapped toward Robert. What are you saying? I'm saying, Robert replied, still looking at me, that I'm betting Summit Point Properties owns a piece of the family business too. I said nothing, but my silence was confirmation enough. Jesus Christ, Marcus breathed. You own part of Dad's company. A minority stake, I said. 15%, as Robert said. It seemed like a sound investment at the time. Morrison Properties has excellent fundamentals. Once the over-leveraging was corrected. You've been on our board? Dad asked. Under the company name. Yes, I've attended every shareholder meeting for 3 years. I've voted on every major decision. You just never connected Summit Point Properties with me. Emily was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Who are you? I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. The apartment building where I live. The one you co-signed for. What about it? Mom asked weakly. I bought the building 18 months ago. You've been co-signing on a lease. I'm paying to myself. I kept meaning to remove you from the paperwork, but it never seemed important. I smiled. I'll have my attorney handle that next week. I walked out onto the deck, leaving them in shocked silence. The sun had fully set now, and the lake was dark except for the lights from houses along the shore. Each light represented a family, a story, a life. I heard the door open behind me. I turned to see Dad standing there, alone. I don't know what to say, he admitted. You don't have to say anything. I was proud of you, you know, when you were younger. Before I decided you weren't living up to your potential. I was always living up to my potential, Dad. You just couldn't see it. He was quiet for a long moment. Your grandfather would be proud too. He always said you had his mind for real estate. I thought he was being sentimental. He saw clearly, more clearly than any of you. Can we fix this? Dad asked. Can we come back from this? I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who'd taught me to fish off this very dock. Who'd helped me with homework at the dining room table. Who'd also spent the last decade making me feel small. I don't know, I said honestly. That depends on whether you can see me as I actually am, instead of who you want me to be. I want to try. Then we'll see. But Dad, the lake house is mine. Morrison Properties. I'm a voting shareholder. My success is real, whether you acknowledge it or not. I don't need your approval anymore. He nodded slowly, pain evident on his face. I know. I can see that now. Inside I could hear raised voices, Marcus and Emily arguing with Mom and Robert. The family fracturing in real time. You should probably go deal with that, I said. Dad started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, Sarah. I'm sorry. For all of it. I know you are. Now he went inside. And I stood alone on the deck of my lake house, looking out at the water. My phone buzzed. A text from David Berkshire. Everything okay? I can be there in 30 minutes if you need me. I typed back. I'm fine. See you tomorrow at 9. Another text came in. This one from my property manager Tom. The new apartment complex closed today. Congratulations, boss. Summit Point now owns 44 residential properties. 44 properties. 15% of Morrison Properties. Commercial holdings across the Twin Cities. Not bad for someone who just manages apartments. I heard cars starting in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Marcus and Jennifer loading suitcases into their BMW. They were leaving tonight, not even waiting for tomorrow. Emily and her husband were close behind them. Mom and Dad stood in the doorway, looking lost. Uncle Robert was talking to them quietly, probably explaining the full scope of what had just happened. They'd come here planning to celebrate cutting me out. Instead, they discovered I'd never needed them in the first place. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone rang again. This time, it was my business partner Linda Chavez, who ran the commercial properties division of Summit Point. Hey Sarah, I heard you finally told them. News travels fast. Robert Morrison called me. He's on our board for the Henderson Plaza project. He put two and two together. She paused. How do you feel? Honestly, relieved. Tired of pretending to be less than I am. Good, because I've got an opportunity you'll want to hear about. Waterfront development property. 6 acres on Lake Minnetonka. I'm listening. As Linda described the property, an old resort being sold by a family trust, I watched my parents finally get into their car. Ching. They sat there for several minutes before pulling away, taillights disappearing down the long driveway. Uncle Robert came out onto the deck. Mind if I join you? It's a free deck. Well, technically it's my deck, but you're welcome. He smiled slightly at that. I should have seen it. All the signs were there. The way you ask questions at board meetings. The detailed understanding of property values. The strategic thinking. You saw what you expected to see. Everyone did. For what it's worth, I argued against excluding you from the sale proceeds. But I didn't push hard enough. I'm sorry for that. Thank you. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. What happens now? Robert asked. Tomorrow the locks get changed. After that we'll see. Family relationships are complicated. That they are. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. This is my daughter Christine. She's about your age. Works in hotel management. I've probably done the same thing to her. Underestimated her. Assumed her career was lesser than her brother's. You should talk to her. I will. He put his phone away. The board meeting next month. Will you be there? I'm always there. I just won't be hiding anymore. Good. We need your voice. We've needed it all along. After Robert left, I sat on the deck for hours, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars reflect on the water. This house, my grandfather's house, now legally mine, protected, preserved. My phone buzzed with messages throughout the night. Emily, surprisingly, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Can we talk? Marcus, this is a lot to process. Mom, please call me when you're ready. I'd respond eventually. But tonight was for me, for reflection, for understanding what had just happened. I'd spent 3 years allowing my family to underestimate me. Part of it was strategy. There was power in being underestimated. But part of it was fear. Fear that if they knew the truth, they'd want something from me. Try to control me. Turn my success into their opportunity. And I'd been right to worry. The moment they'd thought they could exclude me, they had. But I'd also learned something important. I didn't need their validation. Summit Point Properties was successful because of my work, my vision, my risk-taking. The company would continue to grow, whether my family acknowledged it or not. Around midnight, I went inside to the room that had been mine as a child. Mom had indeed packed everything into boxes, but she'd done it carefully. I could see my old swimming trophies wrapped in bubble wrap, my high school yearbooks, photos from family vacations. She'd been crying while she packed. I could see tear stains on some of the newspaper she'd used for wrapping. I left the boxes where they were. This was still my room. In my house. They could stay. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw David Berkshire's Mercedes pulling up. 9 a.m. exactly. I made coffee, and met him on the deck. He was carrying a leather briefcase and wearing his usual impeccable suit. Good morning, Sarah. How are you holding up? Better than expected, actually. He set down his briefcase and pulled out a folder. I've prepared new formal agreements for property access. Anyone wanting to use the lake house will need to sign these, agreeing to your terms and acknowledging your ownership. Thank you. I also took the liberty of drafting shareholder disclosure documents for Morrison Properties. Since you're no longer hiding your identity, the board needs formal notification that Summit Point Properties is controlled by Sarah Morrison. That's going to be an interesting board meeting. Indeed. David smiled. I spoke with Emily last night. She's processing, but she asked me to tell you she'd like to meet for coffee next week. No agenda, just talking. I'll think about it. Another car pulled into the driveway. My parents. They looked like they hadn't slept. David squeezed my shoulder. I'll be inside if you need me. Take your time. Mom and Dad approached slowly, like they weren't sure if they were welcome on their own family property, or what used to be their family property. We brought coffee, Mom said, holding up a carrier from the local cafe. The way you like it. Vanilla latte. Extra foam. It was such a small gesture, but it was the first time in years she'd remembered my coffee order without being reminded. Thank you, I said, accepting it. We sat at the deck table, the same table where we'd had countless family meals over the years. We talked all night, Dad said. About everything. About how we've treated you. About our assumptions. And I asked. And we were wrong. Completely fundamentally wrong. Mom's voice was thick with emotion. We saw what we wanted to see, not what was actually there. You let us. Dad added. And I understand why now. You didn't trust us to react well to your success. Can you blame me? Look what happened the moment you thought you had the chance to exclude me. No, Mom said. We can't blame you at all. Dad pulled out a document. This is the contract we signed 3 years ago. Selling the lake house to Summit Point Properties. I read it carefully last night. Really read it. For the first time. The price you paid was well below market value. You could have negotiated harder. But you didn't. You gave us the money we needed immediately. No questions asked. You were family. You were struggling. You saved us. Mom said softly. Morrison Properties would have gone under without that capital. We would have lost everything. Our business, our reputation, our livelihood. I know. You knew then too. You knew exactly how desperate we were. And you helped us anyway. Dad's voice cracked. And we repaid you by planning to cut you out of this house's proceeds. Yes. You did. We sat in silence. The morning sun was warm on the deck. Birds singing in the trees. We don't deserve your forgiveness, Mom said. We know that. But we'd like the chance to earn it. However long that takes. I sipped my coffee, thinking, these were the people who'd raised me, loved me, failed me, and hurt me. Family was complicated. It was messy. It was full of mistakes and misunderstandings. But it was still family. Here's what I'm willing to do, I said finally. You can keep using the lake house, but under formal lease agreements, fair market rent, proper contracts. I'll give you a family discount. But this is business now. That's more than fair, Dad said quickly. I'm not finished. At Morrison Properties, I want a seat on the board, not as Summit Point Properties, but as Sarah Morrison. I want my voice heard, my ideas considered. Yes, Dad said. Absolutely. And most importantly, you need to understand that this is who I am. I'm a successful businesswoman. I built something real and substantial. I don't need you to approve of my choices, but I do need you to respect them. We will, Mom promised. We do. One more thing, I added. You're going to call Marcus and Emily. You're going to tell them that any inheritance or family proceeds will be divided equally among all 3 of us. No exceptions. Of course, Dad said. That should have always been the case. David came out onto the deck. Sarah the locksmith is here. Should I have him start? Actually, I said, looking at my parents. Let's hold off on changing the locks. For now. Relief flooded Mom's face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do. A lot of trust to rebuild. We know, Dad said. And we'll do the work, however long it takes. Over the next few hours, we signed agreements, discussed terms, and started the slow process of rebuilding. David witnessed everything, ensuring all the legal aspects were properly handled. By noon, Marcus and Emily had arrived, summoned by our parents. We all sat in the living room, the same room where they'd held their tribunal the night before, but this time was different. This time, I sat at the head of the table, my table in my house, and when I spoke, they listened. I want to tell you about Summit Point Properties. I began, about how I built it, what it means to me, and where it's going. I talked for over an hour, about grandfather's trust, about my first duplex purchase, about the risks I'd taken, and the lessons I'd learned, about working 12-hour days, while they thought I was just managing apartments, about board meetings and property acquisitions, and market analysis. They listened without interrupting, really listened. When I finished, Marcus spoke first. I owe you an apology, a real one, not just words. I dismissed your career because it made me feel better about mine. That was wrong. I did the same, Emily admitted. I thought being a lawyer was somehow more impressive than what you do, but you've built something I could never build. I see that now. We all see it, Dad said, and we're proud of you. Genuinely proud. I don't need your pride, I said honestly, but I wouldn't mind your respect. You have it, Mom said. You've always deserved it. We talked into the afternoon, clearing air, setting boundaries, establishing new terms for our relationships. It wasn't comfortable. There were tears, raised voices, hard truths, but it was real. As the sun set over Lake Minnetonka, once again, my family gathered on the deck, not to celebrate cutting someone out, but to acknowledge what had been broken, and commit to fixing it. To new beginnings, Uncle Robert said, raising his glass of wine. To honesty, Emily added. To family, Dad said, looking directly at me. All of us, equally. I raised my own glass. To knowing your worth, even when others don't see it. We drank, and I looked out at the water, the same view I'd loved my whole life, but seen through different eyes now. I'd spent 3 years hiding my success, protecting myself from my family's judgment, but I'd also been protecting them from their own prejudices, their own limitations, their own failures to see clearly. That protection ended yesterday. Now we'd see if we could build something better, something based on truth instead of assumptions, respect instead of dismissal. My phone buzzed. Linda, texting about the waterfront development property. Owner accepted our offer. 6 acres on Lake Minnetonka, closing in 30 days. I smiled and typed back. Perfect. Let's start planning. Summit Point Properties was about to expand again. More properties, more success, more growth, and this time, my family would know about all of it, whether they liked it or not. The salt air from the Atlantic Ocean usually calmed me, but today it felt heavy with tension. I stood in the living room of the Outer Banks beach house, watching my older brother Derek pace back and forth like a lawyer presenting his closing argument. You've been freeloading here for 2 months, Derek said, his voice sharp and deliberate. That ends now. 48 hours, Amanda. That's all you get. He slapped a document onto the coffee table. It looked official, typed headers, legal language, even a notary seal at the bottom. To anyone who didn't read carefully, it looked like a legitimate eviction notice. I glanced at it briefly but didn't pick it up. I already knew what it said because Derek had told me his plan 3 days ago during a phone call he thought I couldn't hear. He'd been on the deck, talking to his wife Melissa about finally getting rid of the dead weight. Around me, the rest of my family formed a semicircle. Mom sat on the white leather couch, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Dad stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, a united front. My younger sister Claire perched on the arm of the couch, examining her manicured nails like this was all just mildly inconvenient. Derek's wife Melissa stood by the window, smiling that sharp smile she always wore when she thought she was winning something. 2 months of free rent. Melissa chimed in. Do you know what this place costs per night during summer season? $4,000. You've lived here for free, while the rest of us have actual responsibilities. I've been working remotely, I said quietly. I told you I was handling some business matters here. Business matters. Claire snorted. You work as some kind of freelance consultant. That's not a real job, Amanda. That's what people say when they're unemployed. I worked as a property acquisition consultant, or at least that's what my business card said. What my family didn't know was that I owned the consulting firm, and the investment company behind it, and a portfolio of commercial and residential properties along the East Coast. The point is, Derek continued, pulling everyone's attention back to him, this house belongs to our family trust. Dad and Mom are the trustees, and they've decided you can't stay here anymore. I looked at my parents. Is that true? Dad shifted uncomfortably. Derek makes some valid points, Amanda. You're 34 years old. You should have your own place by now. I do have my own place. Several, actually. An apartment in Charlotte doesn't count, Mom said dismissively. We mean a real home. A house. Stability. Like Derek has. Derek and Melissa owned a McMansion in a gated community outside Raleigh. He worked as a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company, pulling in a solid 6-figure salary that he never let anyone forget about. We're trying to help you grow up, Derek said, and the condescension in his voice made my jaw tighten. Sometimes people need tough love to reach their potential. My phone started ringing. I pulled it out and saw the caller ID. James Morrison, Coastal Properties Management. Perfect timing. I need to take this, I said. We're in the middle of a family discussion, Melissa protested. It's important. I swiped to answer and put the phone on speaker, setting it on the coffee table next to Derek's fake eviction notice. Hello? Good afternoon, Miss Turner. James Morrison's professional voice filled the room. I'm calling to confirm that the oceanfront property transfer completed this morning. The deed is registered in your name, and I've forwarded all the documentation to your email. The room went completely silent. Thank you, James, I said calmly. I've been waiting for that confirmation. The previous owners vacated yesterday as scheduled. The property is now entirely yours, all 7,000 square feet, including the private beach access, the boat dock, and the 3-car garage. Quite an acquisition, if I may say so. Derek's face had drained of all color. He was staring at my phone like it was a snake. I appreciate you handling everything so smoothly, I continued. What about the property management transition? All set. We'll continue managing it as a luxury vacation rental when you're not in residence. Based on comparable properties, we're projecting about $200,000 in annual rental income during peak season. Excellent. I'll review the marketing materials you sent and get back to you by end of week. Perfect. Oh, and Miss Turner, congratulations on property number 12. Your portfolio is quite impressive for someone your age. Thank you, James. I'll talk to you soon. I ended the call and looked up at my family. They were all frozen in various states of shock. Property number 12, Claire whispered. I picked up my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Yes, I acquired another beach house about 3 miles south of here. Closed on it this morning. You bought a beach house. Mom's voice was faint. A 7,000 square foot beach house with private beach access. Yes, the previous owners were retiring and wanted a quick sale. I paid cash. Derek found his voice. You don't have that kind of money. Don't I? Amanda, this isn't funny, Dad said, but he sounded uncertain now. What's going on? I walked over to my laptop bag, which was sitting on the dining table. I pulled out a folder, one of several I'd prepared for this exact moment. I'd known this confrontation was coming. Derek had been building toward it for weeks. This is Atlantic Coastal Investments, I said, placing the folder on the coffee table. It's my company. I founded it 6 years ago with money I inherited from Grandma Turner. Grandma Turner left you $5,000. Claire said. We all got the same amount. She left each of her grandchildren $5,000 in her will. Yes, but she also had a separate trust that she established for me when I turned 21. $50,000, specifically designated for real estate investment. I watched understanding dawn on Mom's face. The money she inherited from her brother. Yes, she told me about it the year before she died. Said she saw something in me. A good head for numbers. An eye for value. She made me promise to use it wisely. I opened the folder and spread out documents across the coffee table. Property deeds, tax assessments, rental income statements, portfolio valuations. I used that $50,000 as a down payment on a duplex in Charlotte. Lived in one unit, rented out the other. Then I refinanced and bought a second property, then a third. Each property generated income that I used to acquire more. Derek was reading the documents, his hands shaking slightly. These properties are worth. My current portfolio is valued at approximately $8.3 million. I said, 12 residential properties, 3 commercial buildings, and a small strip mall in Virginia Beach. Annual gross income runs around $900,000 give or take. The silence in the room was profound. I could hear the waves crashing outside, the cry of seagulls, the hum of the air conditioning. That's impossible, Melissa said, but her voice lacked conviction. It's very possible when you understand real estate markets, know how to identify undervalued properties, and aren't afraid of renovation projects. I pulled out another document. This is my consulting business. Turner Property Acquisitions. I help investors find and evaluate coastal properties. I charge a percentage of the deal value. Last year, I made $400,000 in consulting fees alone. Claire picked up one of the rental income statements. This property in Wilmington generates $12,000 a month. It's a luxury rental near the historic district. very popular with tourists and business travelers. Dad sat down heavily on the couch. Why didn't you tell us? Because of this, I gestured around the room. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you dismissed it. Derek called me a freelancer with no real job. Mom said I needed to find stability. You all treated me like I was failing at life. We thought you were struggling. Mom said weakly. I let you think that. Because it was easier than constantly defending myself. Easier than watching you find new ways to diminish what I'd accomplished. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, then turned the screen toward them. This is my primary business account. Current balance, $1.2 million. That's liquid cash, not including property equity or retirement accounts. Derek had gone from pale to red. You've been lying to us for years. I've been private about my success. There's a difference. I never lied. I told you I was a property consultant. I told you I worked in real estate. You just assumed that meant I was barely scraping by. You let us pay for dinner. Claire accused, multiple times. You let us think you couldn't afford it. You insisted on paying. You liked paying because it made you feel generous, successful, superior. I didn't need your money, but I let you have your illusion because it seemed to make you happy. I walked over to where Derek was standing and picked up his fake eviction notice. Speaking of illusions, this document is worthless. It's not legally valid, and you know it. It's from the family trust. Derek started. The family trust doesn't own this house. I interrupted. Not anymore. The color drained from his face again. What are you talking about? I pulled out another document from my folder. This is the deed to this property. The Outer Banks Beach House, at 4782 Ocean View Drive. Notice the owner listed here. Mom grabbed the document. Her hands were shaking as she read. Amanda Elizabeth Turner. This says you own this house. As of 14 months ago. Yes, that's impossible. Dad said, we bought this house 20 years ago. It's been in the family trust since then. The trust owned it until last year, when you ran into financial difficulties. Do you remember the property tax crisis? I watched them remember. Last summer, there had been a reassessment of beachfront properties in the Outer Banks. Tax values had skyrocketed. The family trust, which owned this house, and 2 rental properties in Nags Head, had been hit with a massive tax bill, almost $80,000, due immediately. The trustees, you and Dad, were scrambling to find the money. You'd overextended on Derek's investment property in Raleigh, and didn't have liquid cash. You were talking about selling one of the Nags Head rentals at a loss just to cover the tax bill. Someone made an offer, Mom said slowly. A private buyer. They paid cash for the beach house. We got enough to cover the taxes and keep the rental properties. That private buyer was me. Well, technically it was Atlantic Coastal Investments, LLC, but I'm the sole owner of the LLC. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. You bought our family beach house. I bought it for fair market value. Actually slightly above market value. I paid $2.1 million. The money saved the trust from insolvency, and allowed you to keep the rental properties that generate income for Mom and Dad's retirement. Why? Dad asked. Why would you do that? Because I wanted to preserve this house. Because it's where we spent summers as kids. Where Grandma Turner taught me to fish off the pier. Where I have my best memories. I couldn't let it go to a stranger who'd turn it into just another rental property. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. So I bought it. And I've let all of you continue using it whenever you wanted. I never charged rent, never restricted access. I just quietly owned it, and paid the taxes and maintenance. But you've been staying here for 2 months, Melissa said. Like you don't own it. I've been staying here because I'm working on a development project nearby. And this is convenient. But yes, I've been staying in my own house. Claire was still processing. So when Derek said you were freeloading, I was staying in my own property, which I've generously allowed all of you to use for over a year, without ever asking for anything in return. Derek looked at his fake eviction notice, then at me. For the first time in my life, I saw something like respect in his eyes. Or maybe it was fear. The deed's in your name, he said. We can't contest it. No, the sale was legal, properly executed, and filed with the county. Atlantic Coastal Investments purchased the property from the Morrison Family Trust. All trustees signed the paperwork. You can verify it with the county records if you'd like. I picked up my laptop and opened it, pulling up a spreadsheet. Since we're being transparent now, here's the full picture. I own this beach house outright. No mortgage. I own the new property I just closed on. Also no mortgage. My total real estate portfolio has about $3 million in debt against $8.3 million in assets. Net worth, excluding retirement accounts and personal property, is approximately $6.4 million. Mom's voice was barely audible. $6 million. Give or take. Property values fluctuate, and you're only 34. Dad said like he was trying to make sense of a puzzle. I'm 34, and I've been working systematically toward financial independence since I was 21. While you all were dismissing me as a failure, I was building something real. Derek set down the papers he'd been holding. I don't understand. If you had this kind of success, why live so modestly? Why drive a 10-year-old Honda? Why wear clothes from Target? Because I'm not interested in impressing people. I'm interested in building wealth. Every dollar I don't spend on luxury cars or designer clothes is a dollar I can invest in property. That's how you build real wealth. Not by looking rich, but by actually being financially secure. But we thought. Claire trailed off. You thought I was poor, unsuccessful, someone to be pitied or lectured, and I let you think that because your assumptions were your problem, not mine. I closed my laptop and gathered my documents back into the folder. Now, about this eviction notice. Since I own this property, I'm the only one who can decide who stays and who goes. Derek's jaw tightened. Amanda, I was just trying to. You were trying to humiliate me in front of the family. You were trying to assert dominance and make yourself feel important by making me feel small. That's not. It is. We both know it is. I picked up his fake eviction document. So here's what's going to happen. You have 48 hours to remove your belongings from this house. Melissa gasped. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You wanted to give me 48 hours. Fine. Now you have 48 hours. Amanda, that's harsh, Mom said. Derek made a mistake. But he's family. Family, I repeated. Like how you all were family when you were planning to kick me out. When you were mocking my career. When you were treating me like a burden. I walked to the door and opened it. 48 hours. All of you. I want you out of my house by Sunday at 6 p.m. You can't throw us all out, Dad said, standing up. Be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You were fine with throwing me out with 48 hours notice. I'm extending you the same courtesy. We didn't know, Claire said. We thought. You thought wrong. You made assumptions without asking questions. You decided I was a failure and treated me accordingly. Now you know the truth, and you'll have to deal with the consequences. My phone rang again. I glanced at it. My attorney, Kevin Peterson. I need to take this, I said, answering. Hi, Kevin. Amanda. The incorporation paperwork for your new development company is ready. I need your signature on a few documents. Are you still at the Outer Banks property? I am. Great. I'm about 40 minutes away. I'll stop by with the papers. Also, I heard the closing went through on the Ocean View property. Congratulations on number 12. Thank you. I'll see you soon. I hung up and looked at my family, who were all staring at me with varying expressions of shock, confusion, and something that might have been embarrassment. That was my attorney, I said. He's coming by to finalize paperwork for my new development company. I'm branching out into commercial development along the coast. Development company? Dad asked. Yes. I'm partnering with 2 other investors to develop a mixed-use property in Duck, retail space, condos, a boutique hotel. The project budget is about $20 million. My share is 30%. Derek sat down heavily. $20 million. It's a significant project. Yes. But the area is growing, and the market research supports it. I expect to see strong returns within 5 years. I checked my watch. Kevin will be here in about 30 minutes. I'd prefer if you weren't all here when he arrives. Family meetings with my attorney present tend to get complicated. Amanda, Mom said, standing up. Please, can we talk about this? What's there to talk about? We made a mistake. We misjudged you. We're sorry. Are you, or are you just sorry that you were wrong? The distinction seemed to hit her hard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Here's the truth, Mom. For years you've all treated me like I was less than. less successful, less ambitious, less worthy of respect. And I tolerated it, because you're my family, and I loved you. But today Derek crossed a line. He tried to humiliate me with a fake eviction notice. He tried to throw me out of my own house. He didn't know it was your house, Dad said. That's not the point. The point is that he felt entitled to make that decision without even asking me about my situation. He assumed he had the right to dictate my life. I looked at each of them. All of you did. You all assumed you knew better, knew more, knew what was best for me. None of you ever asked about my work. You just assumed it wasn't important. We want to make this right, Claire said softly. Do you? Because making it right doesn't mean apologizing and going back to how things were. Making it right means fundamentally changing how you see me and how you treat me. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find James Morrison, standing there with a tablet in his hand. Miss Turner, I apologize for dropping by unannounced. I was in the area and wanted to show you the preliminary marketing photos for your new property. Of course, come in. I gestured him inside. James walked in, nodded politely at my family, and handed me the tablet. We had a photographer out there this morning. I think you'll be pleased with the results. I scrolled through the images. The new beach house looked stunning. Wide decks, floor-to-ceiling windows, updated kitchen with commercial-grade appliances. This is excellent work, James. Go ahead with the listing at our discussed price point, $4,000 per night during peak season. Yes, and make sure the calendar blocks out June and July for personal use. Already done. He took back the tablet. I'll have the full marketing package ready by Monday. This property is going to be very popular. After James left, the silence in the room was thick. $4,000 a night, Melissa said quietly. That's what we pay when we rent beach houses for vacation. That's the market rate for luxury oceanfront properties. I said, my new house will generate substantial income when I'm not using it. Another car pulled up outside. Through the window, I saw Kevin's Mercedes. That's my attorney. You should all leave now. Amanda. Please, Mom, said. Don't do this. Don't push us away. I'm not pushing you away. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. Kevin knocked, and I let him in. He was carrying his leather briefcase and wearing his usual sharp suit. Afternoon, Amanda. I have those documents for. He stopped seeing my family. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. They were just leaving, I said. Kevin set his briefcase on the dining table and started pulling out documents. These are the articles of incorporation for Coastal Development Partners, LLC.
Hi.
Need your signature here, here and here. I signed while my family watched. And this, Kevin continued, is the partnership agreement between you, Michael Torres and Susan Way. You're contributing $6 million in capital for your 30% stake. That's correct. Excellent. Michael and Susan are thrilled to have you on board. Your track record with property acquisition is exactly what this project needs. After Kevin left, my family was still standing in the living room, looking shell-shocked. $6 million. Dad said, you're investing $6 million in a development project. Yes. Where did you get $6 million? I have it. Between liquid cash, property equity I can leverage, and credit lines against my existing portfolio. I have access to more than enough capital. Derek shook his head slowly. I don't understand how we missed this, how we didn't see what you were building. You didn't see it because you didn't want to see it. It was easier to believe I was failing than to accept that I was succeeding in ways you didn't understand. I looked at my watch. It's 3 p.m. You have until 6 p.m. Sunday. That's 48 hours exactly. You're really going to kick us out? Claire asked. Yes. What about future visits? Mom asked. Can we still use the house sometimes? That depends. On what? On whether you can accept me as I actually am. Not as you want me to be. Not as you assumed I was. But as I actually am. A successful real estate investor. A business owner. Someone who doesn't need your advice, your pity, or your condescension. We can do that, Dad said quickly. Can you? Because I'm not convinced. For years you've defined your relationship with me based on the assumption that you were more successful, more established, more knowledgeable. Can you handle a relationship where that's not true? The question hung in the air. I think, Mom said slowly, that we need time to process this. All of this. Take all the time you need, but take it somewhere else. I need you out of my house by Sunday. Derek finally stood up. His face was red, but he seemed to have accepted defeat. For what it's worth, Amanda, I'm sorry. I genuinely thought I was helping you, pushing you to be better. I know you did. That's what makes it worse. You genuinely believed you were in a position to judge my life without knowing anything about it. He nodded and started gathering his things. Melissa followed, quiet for once. Claire approached me. I'm sorry too. I've been a terrible sister. Yes, you have. Can we fix this? Maybe, but not today. Today, I need you to leave. After they'd all gone, I stood on the deck and watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The beach was quiet, just a few people walking along the shore, kids building sandcastles. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner Michael Torres. Contract signed. Welcome to Coastal Development Partners. We're going to build something amazing. I smiled and texted back, looking forward to it. Another text came in. This one from Kevin. Your family seems surprised. Everything okay? Everything's fine. They just learned some things they should have known years ago. I sat down in one of the deck chairs and opened my laptop. I had work to do. Rental property reports to review, market analysis for the duck development project, and emails from 3 potential consulting clients. The life I'd built wasn't glamorous. I didn't have a luxury car or a closet full of designer clothes. I didn't go on expensive vacations or throw lavish parties. But I had something better. I had financial security. I had property. I had a business I'd built from scratch. I had the freedom to make my own choices without depending on anyone. And I had this house. The beach house where my grandmother had taught me to see potential where others saw nothing. Where she'd told me that quiet success was often more powerful than loud failure. Don't worry about impressing people. She'd told me when I was 21. Sitting on this very deck. Worry about building something real, something solid, something that can't be taken away by other people's opinions. I'd taken her advice, and it had led me here to ownership, independence, and the satisfaction of proving that my path, however unconventional, had been the right one. My phone rang. Mom's number. I let it go to voicemail. There would be time for reconciliation, for rebuilding relationships, for finding a new dynamic with my family. But that time wasn't now. Now was for boundaries, for consequences, for making it clear that I would no longer accept being diminished. The sun touched the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of orange and gold. I took a photo and posted it to my business Instagram account, the one my family didn't know existed. The one with 40,000 followers interested in real estate investment and coastal property markets. The caption: sometimes the best revenge is simply being undeniably successful. Beach house #1. Sunset view. Property #12 closes tomorrow. Within minutes, comments started rolling in. Congratulations, inspiration, questions about investment strategies. I answered a few, then closed the laptop and just sat, listening to the waves. Tomorrow, I'd deal with whatever came next. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what a new relationship with my family might look like. But tonight, in my beach house, with the ocean stretched out before me, and a portfolio worth millions behind me, I was exactly where I was supposed to be: successful, independent, undeniable, and that was enough.